closer. Thank you. I am a journalist, and most of the stories that I have come with a trigger warning, like my first one. So in 2012, about 13 years ago, I was a young reporter, and in Mangaluru, in coastal Karnataka, there was an attack on young men and women who were celebrating a birthday at a homestay. Now, a gang of self-styled vigilantes who considered themselves to be some sort of custodians of culture, religion, what have you, decided that they were not okay with how these youngsters were celebrating the birthday, so they barged into the homestay, trespassed, they roughed up the youngsters, they dragged them out, they pulled them by their hair, they beat them, and all of this was captured on camera. They were very proud of what they did. As a young reporter, I made my way from Bengaluru to Mangaluru. It was about an 8-hour drive all night long, and I was seething. The visuals were very, very dramatic, and I couldn't quite imagine what the youngsters were going through. Now, in my mind, the story was a pretty straightforward one. I knew what had happened. I knew the facts of the story. I knew how it had unfolded and how I should report on it, right? So I went there, I started doing my job, I spoke to the officials, I spoke to the accused, I spoke to even those attackers. And they openly, candidly admitted, very proudly, what they'd done. After a few live reports of mine went on air, a senior editor called me up, and I was advised to take a more measured, considered approach towards the assaulters. I was told that there is a morality involved. We don't want to offend our viewers. And also, the assaulters had some very powerful, influential backers. Now, this was not just an editorial directive. This was an attempt to change and alter the narrative, to control what the story was, and to manipulate the facts of the story. Of course, I fought back. It came at a cost. But this was it was a milestone, and it was a defining moment for me early on in my career on what journalism can be. It's never as straightforward as, the things that you learn in journalism school, right? You have to be objective, you gather your facts, and the 10 things that they teach you. When you go out on the field, all of that gets thrown out of the window, and this was one such exposure. Now, the reason I'm coming up with this is it also taught me the power of narratives. That day, if all the journalists who were there on the ground had succumbed to the pressure of their respective editors, the story of these youngsters who were just there to have a good time, they were all around the same age as many of you here in the audience, between the ages of, say, 18 to 20, their stories would not have been heard. The story would have been that there was something shady, something murky, something illegal going on, which was not the fact. And that also made me realize that in life, you're constantly trying to kind of get control over your time, your own story, over the narrative, right? When I was young, I thought that with age, I will have more control over my time, control over my own decisions, control over my own story, of my identity. Little did I realize that as you grow up, every single thing is a negotiation for that autonomy, for that control. And how you negotiate shapes you and shapes your life. Just to give you a very small example, I loved reading when I was young. And of course, I was a member in just 2 local libraries, and my parents had a certain quota of how many books they'd buy for me in a month, right? But, a day or so from when I'd come back from the library, I'd sit, till late in the night in the dim light of my bed light, I would finish reading those books. So I thought to myself back then, when I grow up, I won't have anyone stopping me. I'll buy as many books as I want, and I'll read till when I want. We all know that's not how life panned out, right? It's the story of most adults. I have a long list of, the ever-growing list of stories that I want to, or books I want to read. I'm always catching up, 10 steps behind. And this isn't just about control of our own time. It's also about what we want to do with our lives. Many of you probably are at that crossroads where you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your lives. I was like that when I was 16. This is late 99, 2000. Many of my friends, my classmates, this is when Bengaluru saw this engineering boom. Literally every other person took up science and went on to become an engineer. Now, maybe out of peer pressure, I took up science too. Very early on, I realized I was not great at it. I did not enjoy it. It wasn't for me. But I had to endure those 2 years. When I made the switch to arts, which was not a favorable option at the time, I realized that not just did I thrive, I actually felt liberated. I felt in control of my life, and that did reflect in who I became, who I was every single day. So unfortunately, the struggle didn't end there. When I went on to start my career in journalism, every single day is a struggle to control your story. Now, you are the reporter. I've been a field reporter for over 10, 12 years. And then I went on to the other side. But all those years, every day was a struggle to set the narrative straight. I am the person on the field. I am the person who is making those calls, gathering facts. So I know the story better than anybody else. But here's where the problem is. Indian newsrooms, especially legacy media, in the last 5 to 10 years, has a habit of dictating the facts to the reporter on the ground. So every single day, the person on top crafts the story. Now, that is influenced by a whole bunch of things. Your sponsors, your advertiser, people outside who are influential and they want to control the narrative and set a certain agenda. That editor then, that has a trickle down. It comes to the news desk. Then the news desk dictates to the reporter on the ground what line should be taken when the person is put on air, live, right? And for me, a large part of my journalistic career has been dictated by these struggles, because there would be so much of a mismatch between what somebody, say, sitting in a Noida or a Delhi or a Mumbai wants me to say and what I see facts to be and what I want to say. The ticker on the screen would say something. The anchor who's asking me questions and presenting certain facts, certain version of the story, would echo the editorial line. And I would often on air contradict all of that, the stance taken by the news organization that I work with. All this leads to everyday conflicts. It's very tempting, when you're pulled up at 3, 4 a.m. for something that's not your fault, but simply because you stood your ground and you refused to kind of succumb. You sometimes feel, should I have just let go? Should I just do what people want me to do? Should I let go of the narrative, let someone else control the narrative? Thankfully, more often than not, I didn't take that road. And I'm very glad that when I had more energy when I was much younger, I took that battle up. Because it does take up a lot of your mental and physical bandwidth. I want to give another example of where somebody else tried to set the narrative. In 2017, on September 5th, I'd just gotten back home, and I got a call saying that Gauri Lankesh, journalist and activist, had been killed. She was assassinated in Bengaluru. I rushed to her house. I hadn't processed what the information that was given to me in that call was. It was surreal for me. Gauri is somebody I'd known for many, many years. She was relentless, she was fearless, and she was somebody who spoke her mind no matter what the cost. And I did not always agree with her, but I used to regularly have these long conversations with her, which gave me perspective. Sometimes she agreed with me eventually, saying, maybe I got this wrong and you're right. But it really added value to my life. I wouldn't go as far as calling her a friend, but she was somebody I knew well. So when you're reporting on the assassination of a person you know so well, it was traumatic, to say the least. But as I was gathering my wits and the facts from the police and others, there was another force which was spinning another story, another narrative. Now, Gauri, through her long career, had taken up diverse causes. She was an outspoken critic of the right wing, but she'd also put in many years and had tried very hard to bring Naxals to the mainstream, to get them to give up arms and violence. Now, the narrative that was being spun was that Gauri's assassination had something to do with that part of her work, that it was the Naxals and Maoists who had killed her. It's very difficult for me to even now, it's almost 8 years, 9 years now, and it's still very, very surreal as I speak about it. And I knew this to be not true because I know that Gauri had gotten many lawsuits, threats from right-wing, extreme hardcore right-wing extremists. And speaking to her family, it became quite apparent that that is what had cost her her life eventually. But this force that was working, even within my organization, tried very hard to push that narrative. I fought back. It came at a personal cost to me. But that was a battle to set the record straight that I had to take up. It took several months. Thankfully, years later, the investigation does show where the facts are. But there have been so many such battles. The reason I talk about this in journalism is in the last 4 to 5 years, before I decided to walk away from legacy media and work with independent news organizations like the News Minute, I had to make a difficult decision. Do I try to be in the system, be an internal dissenter, try to fight the system from within? I did that for a long time, only to realize that it wasn't, it didn't kind of give the results that I was hoping for. I was drop in the ocean, right? It didn't quite pan out the way I was hoping. Then I chose my autonomy and I walked away from there. And I realized that the story of the people that I report on, so many of them, is also the same. These are people fighting for the freedom of choice, to wear what they want, to love who they want, to eat what they want, right? And that also is the story of the journalist who is trying to narrate their story. So I walked away from there. And today you see there are so many independent news organizations, much smaller in size compared to these large-scale legacy media organizations with endless resources. They have 400-500 people working, and we operate with 30-40 people. But the people that we work with are those who've come here with a lot of conviction. They believe in what they do. Not 1 minute now do I doubt the intent of my colleague in my newsroom. And that, for me, is extremely liberating. So all of us are here for a cause that we will not let somebody else walk away with the narrative for an ulterior motive. We report facts as we see it. Nothing for us is more important than that. And I find that this is, in a way, what defines adulthood, right? All of us as adults are doing this battle along the way, negotiating with a whole bunch of things. And I just want to leave the young people here with a thought that it's not going to be easy. But if I may, do make sure that you control your story. It may not be easy. It may take you down a more difficult path. But do not let anybody else, your parents, your teachers, the society, most importantly, control your story, control your narrative. And that's the only thing I've learned being in journalism for as long as I have. Thank you for your time.